Guten Morgen, fans of Reddit Voice. I'm your host, Ryan, and today we're going to be looking at some of the top stories from r/ProRevenge. Before we do, though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. Good luck paying for the car. So this isn't my story. It happened to a friend of mine, so exact details are difficult to get, but this is what I was told. And for ease of the story and to hide identities, the names I use are Jack and Jill. Bit of a story. Jack and Jill had been going out for nearly 5 years by the point of this story. A year prior, Jill lost her job due to the company she worked for being liquidated. Money got tight for Jill, so Jack offered to help by covering her car payments, monthly installment, road tax, insurance, and fuel, so she could put the money she got to rent and utilities until she got a new job and was financially stable. Jack had a fairly decent job, so it wasn't a strain on his income. A year goes by and Jill's still unemployed, but not through rejections. She got lazy and spent all day doing nothing around her house whilst Jack was at work. One day, Jack gets off work early and decides to surprise Jill on the way home. But as he's approaching her house, he sees another car in the driveway. He parks up on the street, sneaks up to the house, and looks through the window to see Jill with another man. Jack was pissed, but he didn't burst in there. He walked away, got into his car, and drove off. When Jack got home, he did a little digging and found out who the guy was through Facebook, and found out she'd been having an affair for half a year with this guy. He was now really pissed and wanted revenge, and knew the best way to do it. This is where the revenge comes in. Jill loved her car even though she barely used it. So what Jack did was stop all the payments that were going out of his bank account and put them onto her account as the car was in her name. It was easy to do. As the payments had only just gone out, he had to wait for the end of the month for his revenge to unfold. The end of the month comes and Jill's bank card is declined at the shops. She calls the bank to find out what's going on, and they tell her that she's gone overdrawn because of the car payments going out of her account. Jill phoned Jack and asked why the payments coming out of her account and not his. Jack coldly replied, "'Cause I know you cheated on me and I'm not gonna pay for my ex-girlfriend's car," and hung up. Fallout of the revenge, she tried to get Jack to pay for the car, even got lawsuits involved, but as she was the sole owner of the car, it was declared that he had not legal responsibility to pay for her car. As she couldn't afford her road tax or insurance, she couldn't drive the car, and eventually she got so far behind the payments, the car was repossessed. To pay the debt, she had to get a minimum wage job and now takes the bus to and from work. TLDR, girlfriend cheats on boyfriend, boyfriend stops paying for the car, leaves her in massive debt. He could have always just pushed her down the hill when they were younger, but, you know. Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me. I've never really posted anything here before, but I have a funny revenge/karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, RA at most schools. And like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. He talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if they would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader and always mentioned to me how he drank tons of alcohol his freshman year in the dorms. He gave off the impression he really didn't care if we drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was biochemistry majoring some pretty tough classes and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being naive and a stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, ha ha ha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen show up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor consumption charge for blowing a .02, had to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting shit-faced freshman year in the dorms, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few weeks later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with alcohol, instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds with, word for word, "You made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I have decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I've never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where frats are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my frat was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your frat has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I'd let you know." Turns out Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest and funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our frat GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, the kid pledging our frat came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he'd given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. And this is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our frat told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader Julio, who's now a senior, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing the charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a shitload of trouble. So I sent the text that night to Judicial Affairs people. After that, we didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio and had honestly forgot about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I'm the one that ratted to him in the Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how shitty his life has been since he got fired. After going through the entire Staub story, he asked, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired and I could have kept my scholarship money." I looked at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and said, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." TLDR, my RA made it seem it'd be okay to drink in the dorms and then called the cops on us. I then used the same one-liner on him a year later when I got him fired for violating school policy. For everyone that yells, "Free Bird!" at concerts, you know who you are. One of you is at every goddamn show. I used to tour with a band, and we had around 200 concerts a year, at least 200 times a year. Someone would yell, "Free Bird!" and laugh like they said something clever. I don't understand why it's funny, and hearing it every day for thousands of shows, yep, still not funny at all. So one day we tried to find out the deal. When the Freebird guy of the day yelled, we invited him on stage to answer a few questions. "Why do you yell Freebird?" "Because it's funny." "Why is that funny?" Look of confusion and shame. Okay, so we didn't get any answers, but we certainly came up with one. Nobody comes up with ridiculous ideas like a group of 20-somethings who spend 15 hours a day in a van together. First thing we had to do was buy a sampler. This small piece of equipment that you can pre-program with any sounds you want and press buttons to trigger them. Hell yeah, SPD gang, rise up. They're pretty expensive. The one we bought for the prank was $1,200. Side note, we were staying, all 5 members, to a single hotel every night, and eating nothing but dollar menu garbage and ramen because even if your band's doing good, you're still broke. Just wanted you to understand how ridiculous it was for us to spend $1,000 on this. And as far as I'm concerned, it was worth it 10 times over. The next thing we needed was a folding table with chairs for all of us, some teacups, and a newspaper or 2. We would set these up next to the stage and no one would even notice it was there. So we found a 16-minute long version of Freebird and loaded it onto the sampler. The trap was set. Sure enough, someone yelled "Freebird" at the next show. This time, our lead singer acted really interested. "What's this you say? Freebird? Do you want to hear Freebird?" The audience cheered loudly. "So, just to be clear, you want us to stop playing our set and instead play Freebird?" They cheer again in approval, and now the Freebird guy clearly looks like he's never been so proud of anything he's ever done in his life. We all stepped to the center of the stage in a very serious-looking huddle. We made it a point to go comically long discussing Freebird, and sometimes we would just talk about movies we liked for a while or make fun of each other's sisters. When we felt like it had gone on long enough, and we were terrible about making jokes go way too long, we all nodded and made it clear that we had just agreed to play Freebird. "Alright folks, you asked for it, you got it. Here we go, Freebird!" While the crowd went absolutely nuts, the singer went to the sampler and, like an old man fumbling to use a remote, he found the button and pressed it as anticlimactically as possible. Freebird begins to play, and we put our instruments down and sit around the table. We sip on pretend tea and browse the newspaper quietly. At first everyone thought it was hilarious, but after a few minutes they started to revolt. Chanting for us to come back and all, we would look at each other in a very confused manner and shrug it off a few times before the singer would finally go back to the mic. "What's going on? You don't want to listen to this anymore?" "No." "You want us to play our stuff again?" "Yeah." "Well, what about the guy who yelled Freebird?" "That guy sucks." And then the booing would start for the poor Freebird guy. We did this for an entire tour, and it absolutely never got old. I'd like to think that after a year, tens of thousands of people stopped yelling Freebird at every show they'd go to. At least for me, that makes the world a slightly better place. Update. A lot of people are confused about spending so much on a sampler when there are CD players and iPods. We were doing arena venues, and iPods were only like 2 years old at the time. You wouldn't tell a sound crew to hook one of those things up to $1 million system. They're the guys who can get some serious ProRevenge if you piss them off. And with that final story, we've reached the end of today's r/ProRevenge. If you liked it, make sure to give the video a like, and make sure you're subscribed with that notification bell hit to stay up to date on all our latest videos. As always, my name's Ryan, I was your host for the evening, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in tomorrow's video.